Hello and welcome to the Charles Cook Podcast. The focus of this podcast is state and local issues here in the state of Tennessee. And today, my guest is Danielle Goodrich. She's from the Johnson City Freedom Coalition, and we're going to talk about some of the things that we're seeing all across the state of Tennessee with the growth and everything. A lot of people moving here, the booming housing market, construction, everybody moving into these smaller cities like Greenville and Johnson City and Morristown and Jefferson City, and the issues that it's causing and what our local leaders are getting us into and not even knowing it or willfully turning a blind eye to it. So with that, Danielle, welcome, and let's talk about this and tell us what you're seeing and what some of the research that you found.
Yeah, thanks, Charles, so much for having me on. And hi, everybody. Good to see you all again. So, we're having these city planning meetings, and we actually had one in Johnson City last night, and we found out about it kind of last minute, and I'm sure that that's on purpose. And they're saying that they want community input. So come check out the city planning that we're proposing, and it has to do with all this growth. And they're saying, we need to be prepared for all this growth. So it's called 2040 Horizon 2045. And we went last night, and we thought it was going to be a meeting where they're presenting a city plan. This is, what they're thinking for Johnson City in 2045, and here's the steps how we're going to get there. And that's not what it was. So we got a bunch of people from our group to go, but there was a lot of the local Marxists, there was a lot of the local Democrats, there was the commissioners, there was a lot of young people there. And it was a vision boards. So it was a lot of maps that were set up. They wanted you to take little stickers and show where you lived. And then there was pictures of different types of communities. So more urban looking, more residential, country. And they wanted you to select, okay, what do we need more of? What do we need less of? They had downtown areas with trees and pictures, downtown areas without trees, downtown areas with bike paths. And again, they wanted you to select what you wanted. And then there was a comment section where people could comment on what they wanted their vision for Johnson City to look like. And I want to read a comment to your folks, Charles, about there was this one comment that this young person wrote.
Okay.
And her says, this is her vision. She wants to reduce sprawl, increase density. She wants sustainable infrastructure. She wants public transit and rail connecting to other major cities, mixed use development, less car dependency, a biophilia design, which I'd never even heard of that term before. She wants us to stop destroying our natural resources with poor development. She wants it to be walkable. And clean up waters and clean up air. So I saw this and I was immediately taken aback because I've been watching videos on the UN agenda, and this is the keywords that they use. So yes. I was very interested to see why a young person was writing out all the keywords of the UN agenda. So I went up to her and I spoke with her. And I asked, at first she was very suspicious of me. And she's like, well, who are you with? And I'm like, well, I'm a stay-at-home mom. And I didn't tell her I ran a freedom group. I could tell just from reading this that probably would have been a turnoff to her. And I asked her, what does reduce sprawl mean? What is sprawl? And she said, and I knew the answer already because I'd seen these UN agenda videos. Sprawl are the neighborhoods that you need to use a car to get to. And that's what she said. She said, the neighborhoods that you need a car to get to, we want less of that. We want it to be consolidated so that people can walk to work. And I said, okay, well, what about those of us who want to live in a neighborhood and we want to drive a car? And she said, well, this is about, we all have to live as a collective body. And cars pollute the environment. And so, that's bad. And these neighborhoods are bad. And I said, well, what about the Constitution and our right to move about freely? If we don't have cars and, we're just stuck in these cities, then, that's infringing on our right to move about freely. And then she started talking about, clean air. So it was very apparent that she was spouting off all of the same talking points of the UN agenda. And she didn't really care. When I said Constitution, you would have thought I swore at her, like it was a dirty word.
Right.
And so she's very much talking about this whole idea of socialism, this whole idea of collectivism, where my individual rights don't matter because it's for the greater good. And the whole idea that she believes that her wording was, increased density. So reduce sprawl, reduce the neighborhoods, bring everybody into the city, and increase density. And she tried to tell me that that's healthier because people are then walking to work. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, can you show me some data where people that live in increased density areas, let's talk about China. Are the people who live in China healthier because they have to walk to work? Or are the people, and there's just so much of this with that mindset. It's the whole, we can't have cows because they fart. So let's build a lab and have all of our meat made from crickets in a lab, which is somehow they think that's more green and sustainable than cows in a pasture. And so she ended up walking away from me, which is what typically happens in conversations like this. They can't handle the conversation, so they walk away. But I was so disturbed after this that we had, and I asked her too, where she was from, because I assumed that she came from somewhere else. She's from here.
Yes.
So she's a young person who's from here, who, doesn't care about individual liberty and is spouting off all of the talking points from this agenda. And when you look at the company who was doing who was running this 2045, they too have all these speaking points. I have it pulled up here, so I was going to read from their website. Horizon 2045, we develop collaborative processes for learning and leading across existential threats. They want to advance peace building at a time of rising authoritarianism, climate crisis, and a nuclear arms race. And they want to create new governance models and/or institutions. And they want to, it says, how will changes in environment, shape planetary norms? And it's just a lot of this UN agenda. And after that, I tried to go speak to one of our commissioners, and I was trying to voice our concerns, but she's a social democrat commissioner that we have, and she just laughed as if the UN agenda is a conspiracy theory. When we know the UN agenda, we know that the United Nations exists, and you can go to their website, you can read their 17 goals for sustainable environments, and then you can look at these city plans and you can see how it mimics them. I wrote an article a while back, which was based on our Johnson City strategic plan, because I pointed to a lot of this language that was in there. And I pointed to, it was called Johnson City strategic plan is lipstick on a pig, and it ran in the Tennessee Conservative. But it points to a lot of this agenda that they think sounds great, but in policy, it's not. Like they say, equity. And then, they think equity means, oh, well, everybody has access to public transportation. Well, maybe that's one definition, but equity in history has meant wealth redistribution. It's meant California race reparations. It's meant landowner campaigns in North Korea, where we take private property from the landowners and we give it to the communists. And to this day, the landowners are a lower caste, and ancestors of landowners are lower caste, and the communists are the higher castes.
Well, let me add something right here, if you don't mind. Well, equity will have, everyone will have access to public transportation, because in the end, that's what their goal is to only have public transportation. The only transportation there will be is mass transit that is run by the government. And we or our kids or grandkids will not have access to transportation, only through public service. And we see how Amtrak is run. How well is that run? It's always been lost money. So I just wanted to add to that. That's their goal, is to only have public government transportation. So
exactly, or a bicycle,
Mhm.
we're seeing, and that's part has been mentioned as part of the UN agenda too. You can't ride a horse because they create carbon, emit carbon too, just
Right.
like a cow. So you have to, your choice is a bicycle.
Yeah.
And this all plays into what Chattanooga is up against. So Chattanooga is up against their World Economic Forum smart city, where people will talk about it as a 15-minute city as well, because how they sell it to you is it's so great. It's just like this young person saying, you can walk to work. You're going to be so healthy. You can walk to work. You live in these high towers, these high density areas, and it's a community where, you're not going to be polluting because you're walking to work. But it's this whole thing where, what if we don't want to live in a high density area and we want to live out in the country? So it was an interesting meeting last night. It was highly concerning because there's so many people who are saying that they want this. And when I watched this video about this, it was actually from a Democrat. Her name was Rosa Corey. It was from 11 years ago. It was in Bradley County, Tennessee. And she speaks like a constitutional conservative. Sadly, she passed away. People think it was because she ended up getting the shot. But what she did know really well was how this UN agenda was going to play out and how they were going to use counties to do it. And so she gave a wonderful presentation that somebody sent me, Karen Bracken from Tennessee for State Sovereignty up in Bristol. She sent it to me to watch, but she goes through each step of how this plan is going to be implemented. She did it 11 years ago, and it's exactly what we're seeing in these meetings, where they
What's
say
her
they
name
want
again?
the input, and then the plan's already written.
What
The
was her
plan's
name
already
again?
written. They're just implementing it.
What was the lady's name again?
Her name was Rosa Corey.
Okay.
It's she's the lady who passed away, who did this video in Bradley County. And Karen Bracken of Tennessee for State Sovereignty was the one who shared it with me. But we can see, these vision meetings, they make it seem like they want community buy-in. The people who got the notice for this meeting ahead of time weren't people like our Freedom Group. It was these other people.
Yeah.
For one, Ed Wolf, he is a local Marxist, whether or not he identifies as that. He's a gentleman who runs a group called Black and White Dialogue here, and he essentially preaches Marxism, the whole oppressive narrative. And he's not Black, he's a white guy.
Yeah.
And he was there. And you have a lot of these folks that operate in these other groups that were there and obviously got noticed before we did. So they're not really looking for buy-in from people like us. They already have the plan and they're just implementing it. But it was just concerning, and there's not enough people talking about this. There's not enough people who understand these goals. And if you want to go read that article, Johnson City's strategic plan is lipstick on a pig. It details some of it, but I think I'm going to write another article after last night's experience and go back and look at these organizations. And you can Google Horizon 2045, who they're using for planning, and the UN, and it pulls up that they have spoken at some of their conferences. So then when I go and speak to the commissioner, who plays it off like I'm making things up, and she wants plausible deniability. She wants willful ignorance, so that, so I asked her, I was like, if I send you some things, will you read them? She said no. She said, I'm 74 and, I'm set in my ways, and I know I'm not going to read what you want. And basically she said, if you don't like the way we're doing things, then, get somebody else in or run yourself.
Well,
And so they're not
okay.
even willing to acknowledge that the plans that they're instituting aren't unique to Johnson City. I went and Googled Horizon 2045 and the UN agenda, but other things came up like Horizon 2045 Spokane. It's not even just unique to Tennessee. This
Right.
is being instituted all over the world. And we know how it's going to look. It's going to look exactly how this girl wrote on her paper, reduce sprawl. And you'll be living in dense populations and, you'll have a bike, but you might even have an electric car, which as long as the grid can support it and they're not having rolling blackouts like in California, then you'll be able to charge your electric car. And that's part of the goals in the Johnson City plan. They say go electric. They say
Yeah.
align with the goals of Bright Ridge. Bright Ridge is our local electric company, and they're the ones who gave our city a grant to install smart poles.
Yeah.
And when I asked our mayor, I said, Todd, why do we have smart poles that have surveillance capability in downtown Johnson City? I was like, this is just making us look like China. China has, I forget the figures, like 16 billion cameras or something like that,
Right.
where they're able to surveil all their folks. And it's what institutes their social credit system. So, they can keep tabs on you. And we have that now in Johnson City because we got a grant from our electric company. And there's a lot of things coming in through Bright Ridge, and that's part of the plan. It said on Johnson City strategic plan too, is it says we want to align with the goals of Bright Ridge.
Yeah.
I would bet you that the goals of Bright Ridge are the same as the goals in the UN agenda, are the same as the goals in this Horizon 2045.
Okay, I've got a video queued up here. It's from a news story from, I believe, Channel 11 out of Johnson City. And it's about Greenville. So it's not just about Johnson City, it's about Greenville as well. And basically it's talking about the growth and the issues that all this growth has. And then this is how a lot of this stuff was implemented through the growth issues and seeking grants and stuff, and how all this is brought in. So let me cue this up and we'll watch it here and hear what they have to say. Let's see.
We've been reporting about the boom we're seeing across the Town leaders say it's just a sign of what's to come. News Channel 11's Leah Johnson found out how the town is trying to keep up.
10 years ago, Greenville was known to be a small town, but that statement is no longer the case. Officials predict that people will continue to plant their roots right here in Greene County.
I would say probably 80% of our buyers are coming from out of state.
Certainly for Greenville, it's something that I don't think we've ever seen in our history.
Randy Davenport, planning administrator for the town of Greenville, says the town is growing and developers like D.R. Horton see the housing potential the town has.
They came in and just explained that Greenville was their next market that they wanted to get into, and that they were looking at building anywhere from 800 to 1,000 new houses in Greenville.
But population growth requires the town to evaluate other important factors.
The biggest thing is our infrastructure, which is referring to transportation, utilities, electric power, all of those things.
Davenport says they are already preparing for challenges such as traffic and school capacity.
The school system and the town together has started the process of looking at constructing a new school. With all of that, you're just adding fuel to the fire, so to speak, of a traffic situation already. We've spoken with the Department of Transportation frequently about what can they help us do.
Brad Johnston, managing broker for Hometown Realty, says people want to settle down here, but there are some setbacks.
We still have a lot of buyers, but there's just, right now, there's not a lot of inventory coming on if you're looking for something with a little privacy and land.
Davenport says that the current population is 16,000, and they predict that population to grow to 20,000 or more in the next 5 years. In Greenville, Leah Johnson, News Channel 11.
We've also
Okay, there you go. So we're seeing how much this population increase is, and you take increase of 4,000 people in just a couple of years. That's probably 15 to 1,700 homes, and neighborhoods and stuff. So then, as I said, we reach out, we're seeking all these grants to help fund all this stuff, and we don't realize all the strings that are attached to this stuff. And this is how you get entrenched in this stuff. And many of them, as you said, the councilwoman who's 74-year-old don't want to take time to research this stuff, and has the attitude, well, if you don't like it, just run yourself, or whatever. And they don't realize what they're doing to the future generations.
It's really interesting because she looked at it like she was going to benefit the future generations, but they don't see the freedom implications, and they don't see that you really can't have a constitution. You can't have God-given rights protected by a constitution and this UN agenda as a plan, because if you're talking about taking people's ability away to move about freely, you're talking about taking away their land, you're talking about moving them into an environment maybe they don't want to be moved into. And essentially, you're really talking about collectivism, where you're asking people to surrender their individual liberty for the greater good. And we saw the whole a stair step for us into that mentality during COVID. Oh, you better wear a mask for the greater good, better go get that vaccine for the greater good. You better stay home and close your business. And then you won't have any money to feed your family for the greater good. And so we had people trained into that mentality of collectivism already, but they really don't know that modern forms of collectivism are Nazism, are Marxism, are communism, are socialism. Are a whole bunch of isms that we don't want. But to them, because they've been indoctrinated into the schools, into this whole communitarian thinking, they actually don't think it's that bad. They're like, oh, it's for the greater good. Well, we have to do it. We have to do it for so she sees it as this is a good thing for the future. She doesn't, see it as these freedom infringements. She thinks that I'm blowing it out of proportion. And, when I mentioned what that girl had said, she's like, well, she's entitled to her opinion. And I was like, yeah, but not if it's going to take away our choices of how we want to live.
And, as you and I discussed a little earlier there before we started recording, as I was young once, and I do not see the things the way I saw them when I was 20, early 30s. Get married, have a family, pay bills, stuff, and your thought process really starts to change, and you start looking at things. And as I said, a lot of things for myself is, and just like this, I believe this young lady will eventually see things that, it's not the way it was. That's not the way I was taught. We were taught all this stuff. And one of the hardest things is, once you start questioning things, is to realize that most of the stuff that you were taught, especially in public school, government schools, if we're going to call it public education, it's government education, that we were lied to. And then you have to question everything that you've learned. And that's what you really should be doing now. If you're looking at these things, if you're watching this and you think, well, they were wrong about it. Well, if they were wrong about that, what else were they wrong about? And then you really should start questioning and start researching things on your own. And it's hard to admit that basically everything you were taught in public school, especially when it comes to history and stuff, that it's wrong.
Yeah.
And you know, or it was twisted, and you have to go and learn for yourself. And it's hard to admit that you've been wrong yourself. A lot of things that you've said and a lot of things that you told, you were wrong about.
That's
And
right.
so that's what the problem is, from the young lady to the elderly lady.
Mm-hmm.
It's the pride deal.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, okay, I'm going to learn for myself. So go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, with the commissioner, she's choosing not to look into it. She's just choosing to have that willful ignorance so that she doesn't have to address it. And that's a problem for the young person. I agree, because like you said, you know, I was blind to all these things too. I went to Syracuse University, and I would just repeat everything that I was told, and I would parrot it until you grow up, you get married, you have a family, and you're like, wait a minute, what I was taught was wrong. And then you learn about the Constitution and your God-given rights, and you learn that, you know, you were basically indoctrinated into socialism via Marxism in school. I think I said this last time I was on your podcast, but Antonio Gramsci, he's a Marxist, and he was a Marxist, and he said that socialism would be precisely the religion to overwhelm Christianity, and they do it in the churches and the schools. And that's what they did. And you know, the humanists wrote the education. So the kids getting turned out, they have this humanist philosophy. So they don't even see, you know, the God-given rights aspect. They're like, oh, God-given rights, you know, those can be ignored as long as it's for the greater good. And
I heard a perfect story in the school systems and how communism took root in Cuba, and how they go after the young people, because they can instill it in the young people, and then it grows throughout the system. And one of the perfect stories that I heard yesterday was in Cuba, when Fidel Castro took over, they sent the soldiers into the schools. And one of the things that they did was tell the kids, okay, I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to pray to God that you will get some candy. And the kids closed their eyes and they prayed. And when they opened their eyes, there was no candy. And then they said, now close your eyes and pray to Fidel Castro that you will get some candy.
wow.
And while the kids had their eyes closed, praying to Fidel Castro that they would get some candy, they put candy on their desk, and when they opened their eyes, there was candy there. Because God couldn't provide it, but Fidel could.
Yeah.
And this is what a lot of stuff is being taught through what you can't do on your own, and what you might have to work so hard to achieve. The government and socialism can give it to you, can give it to everyone.
Yeah.
As a society.
Yeah,
So
she talked about shared resources. And I was like, well, you know, that's the whole socialist philosophy. That's the communitarian collectivism. It's like, okay, well, what of my private property that I have earned should you be able to have claim to? And, you know, they're like, well, we're a community, we must share. So that whole, you know, share just eradicates any individual liberty and private property rights. And in order for them to do this type of plan, you know, that's what it requires. And, you know, the commissioner tried to say, well, don't we need to plan? You know, we are growing. We do need to plan. And I was like, yes, we do need to plan. I'm not saying that we don't need to plan. I'm saying we need to know, you know, who's behind the plan that we're implementing. And we need to know whether or not those policies are policies that we actually want. So one of my friends who moved here from California, she was at this meeting last night too. And when both of us were talking to the commissioner, and we said the reason why so many people are moving here is for low taxes, conservative values, limited government. Because during COVID, California was infringing on their rights, closing their businesses for longer than Tennessee did. And so the people felt smothered, and they wanted to move to a more conservative area like Tennessee, and people from New York. And that's why we're seeing this explosive growth. And she tried to downplay that and say, well, most of the people who are moving here are from North Carolina. And, what they're coming here for is, clean water, clean air, and sustainable. And she's trying to, and I'm like, no, but the surveys, when you ask people, there's been surveys about this, and the surveys have reported the reason why they're coming here is for conservative values. And what you're implementing is not conservative. And my friend Ann, she was standing right there, and she had come from California. So they've seen these policies instituted. The people who are testifying in Chattanooga against the smart city, they're like, we've seen what this electric infrastructure can offer, and we got rolling blackouts. We've seen what these policies can offer, and we fled them only to find that they're being instituted here. And then only to find that they're being instituted here, and the people instituting them don't want to look at it like that. They're, oh, it's progressive, it's sustainable, it's what everybody wants. It's not what everybody wants. It's what everybody was running from. And the disconnect there is maddening, because even when you try to tell them, even when the people who moved here from California try to tell them, they're really not listening, and they're just implementing it anyways.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things that you find out when you talk to most people who move to these to East Tennessee and Tennessee is, and I even talked to a couple from Pennsylvania back in January. They moved here, and they were surprised once they got here and they started seeing, oh my Lord, this is some of the things that we've already dealt with. And, people from California or Illinois or wherever they're coming from, they're seeing this and they're like, we dealt with this 10 or 15 years ago, and the people don't understand. And then when they speak up and say something and say, hey, this is not what you think. You don't want to do this. Oh, you're just shut up, Yankee.
Yeah.
Shut up, Yankee. You're just here to cause trouble. We've got all these people coming in here, and all they want to do is cause trouble. No, they're trying to warn you.
Yeah.
And you won't listen. And in that, are there some people that moving here that agree with this? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And majority of those folks are moving into the cities, not the rural part, because they want to come here and get away from all that stuff. So, but like I said, for a lot of people, it's hard to sit back and say, man, we've been lied to so much, and we have to look at this and try to do something about this now. And they just want to keep putting their head in the sand and act like that nothing is going on. It's all going to be okay. Our government would never do this to us, and that's where you got to stop and say, wait a minute, what has our government done to us before?
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Ask what, have you ever opened up a book and read about the Tuskegee experiment?
Yeah, thalidomide. Yeah.
Yeah, come on. Did you not look and see how the government handled the COVID deal?
Yeah, and Hitler based some of the eugenics laws off of United States laws. I mean, there's a lot of history where our government was complicit in things that were not for the greater good.
Right. And we're going to move all the Indians to this one location because it's for the greater good.
Yeah.
And so like I said, when you stop and you finally say, okay, I'm going to do some reading, I'm going to do some research, you realize that majority of the people in government are not there for you. And I remember having a conversation a few months back with one of our city council persons, and this person looked at me and said, Charles, is there anything that local government does that you agree with? Well, police and fire pretty much do okay.
Yeah.
If your house is on fire, the fire department comes, they put your house out, they put the fire out. Yeah, they do a good job. Somebody's trying to rob you, or you have a car accident or something, and the police shows up. Yeah, they're doing a pretty decent job, but not so much the rest of it,
Yeah.
And it gets all back to the role of government, and that's
It's really
even
interesting because I mentioned the commissioner who happens to be a Democrat, but it's our Republicans too at the GOP committee reorganization. We tried to get some folks in and we weren't successful. And one of the fellows from the other side who spoke, he said, it's all these Californians, they're bringing in their policies, they're bringing in this. And that's not the truth. It's the people who are currently in office who aren't reading the fine print on the funding that they're accepting, and they're implementing it. It's, like the mayor saying, oh, well, we accepted that grant from Bright Ridge. We didn't realize that these smart poles had surveillance capabilities, but isn't it great that we know how many people come to see our Christmas trees each year? Completely not seeing the dots connecting to looking like a surveillance state. And, putting all these pieces in place, which are not going to be freedom supporting or in line with the Constitution. And it's going to very much look like more of a communist state. And they don't see that. They don't see the pieces coming together. The dots don't connect for them. And, you try to connect the dots for them and you send them information and you say, look at this. And the Republicans are more willing to look at it, but they're not more willing to stand against it. So the Democrats are just getting what they want, and they're getting these policies in. We put up a big stink after I wrote that article about the language in the strategic plan. And they said, oh, we're going to change it. We're going to take the diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is essentially critical race theory, out of it. And a Republican tried to argue with me that that's not critical race theory. And they were like, don't worry, we're going to take some of these, it had like go all electric and sustainable and green and all the keywords in there. And they're like, we're going to take that out of there. Well, I'm looking at the plan last night. It's in there in its entirety. Yeah. They didn't change any of it.
Yeah. Well, here where I'm at, our whole county government is controlled by Republicans, and yet most of them act like, they're not from the Republican Party, not to the way I see the Republican Party, but should be conservative. To me, I call them Republicrats, or, they're uniparty. I mean, and I'm sure if they see this video, they ain't gonna like it. I don't care, and we have to speak the truth. And that's one thing I really like about Ramaswamy the other night. I didn't watch the debate, but what he told in his opening statement is absolutely fact. The Republican Party has sold conservatives out. And
I don't fully trust him.
Yeah.
I don't fully trust him because of his background and taking Soros money, and there's different reasons. But he did say the right things that are going to tickle the ears of people like you and me, because it's things that other people won't say. And he did call them out. I mean, he called out Nikki Haley for being on the Boeing board and being a neocon warmongering war profiteer. He was putting them in their place, and that was refreshing. It was.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I don't trust him either, but what he said there was true. And so if you are conservative, and I don't really line myself with Republicans, because what I've seen over the last 2 decades is what they've done. So, but I do consider myself conservative. I'm an individual first, and conservative, but the what people are counting on the Republican Party doing, they're not doing.
Yeah.
And so they're selling us out even here in my own county, and I call them out whenever I get a chance to, and even at their own face at the county commission meetings, I'll call them out. You guys are
Yeah.
supposed to be Republicans, and yet here you are wanting to
Yeah.
raise taxes, and they,
Yep.
you just see the look on their face.
I
But
know the Republican, I think I spoke about this last time we spoke, but the Republican Party platform, the preamble is brilliant. I mean, it says that we're supposed to stand for the Constitution. It says that we're supposed to stand against unelected, unaccountable government, and we're supposed to stand for returning the rights of the families to do what they think is best. And look at, even in just this instance of this smart city implementation and these, smart growth infrastructure, look at all of the unelected, unaccountable government that they're bringing in. They bring
Yep.
in all these third party people who are, guiding these plans. And it's the same in every facet, because our school board, they just had to fight a third party sex ed program, which there's a whole Project Veritas expose on that. They're bringing in all these third parties, they're accepting third party grant money, and it's instituting, the federal plan, and it's instituting the global plan. Even they're basically even using our tax dollars to fund our own demise and to fund our own prison.
Yeah. And just look at Bill Lee, who he puts over the education, over the education commission and stuff,
A
it can
Marxist.
go on and yeah, it goes on and on. And so we conservatives go out and vote for these so-called Republicans, and then we just keep going closer and closer to the cliff, and which is leading us to the places that we're at now, because instead of fighting for what we elected them to fight for, they get in there and they get wrapped up into the system. Or, well, I say that, but I really don't believe that we're questioning them on their principles in the first place.
Yeah.
I think we just simply look for the R beside the name and think that they're good because they have the R beside their name, and we go vote for them instead of really questioning them and finding out if they are really principled people.
Mhm.
If you're principled and you disagree with this, then you don't even debate the issue. You say, no, this is wrong and you can't do this. This is not the role of government. This is not what we're elected to do. It would take the state of Tennessee, for example. We are super majority Republican. And since the 14 year ago, since the Republicans took control of the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the governorship, we have more than doubled the state budget. Yet we're supposed to be small government Republicans and reducing the size of government. You don't double the state government in 14 years, and say that you're small government.
Yeah.
When all you do is continue to grow it.
Mhm.
Yet every one of the Republicans vote for the budget. Well, sure, there's things in there I don't agree with, but I can't go against my party and vote against this budget. Why? Because you'll lose your seat on a committee.
Yeah.
Yeah. That means more to them than doing the right thing and representing their people. And so that's at the state level. It happens in Washington, happens at the local city and county level as well, school board level.
Yeah. And it's frustrating, because how do we even get stronger conservatives in these positions? Because when we tried to get people on the GOP committee, they sent out mailers saying that we're far right extremists. We're an organization from Nashville, despite I've lived here for almost 20 years. I've had my kids here, my basically since college. My husband and I came here right after that, and now my whole family has come here. My parents, my sister, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law. There's a whole bunch of us setting up roots here, and we wanted to stay like America here. and we're willing to fight for it. And yet we're even fighting against Republicans who they get in office and they don't do anything. I mean, I try to send David Seal is doing some real great work out in Jefferson County. He's doing amazing work.
Right.
He's FOIA requesting the schools. He's exposing that they're still teaching critical race theories. He's exposing all of these different agendas. And I send stuff to our GOP chairman here. And I'm like, you know, this is the potential. This is what it could look like when the GOP works with these freedom groups like Empower Jefferson or like my group here, and works with the commission, and they're passing resolutions to support nullification, and they're getting things done in Jefferson County. And I'll text that to my GOP chairman here, and he's like, that's great, Danielle, good job. I'm like, no, this isn't something I did. This is something that I want us to do here. And then crickets. So,
Right.
you know, they have the position to influence, and yet they're not influencing or doing anything. They're not taking any of the steps of these active GOPs like David Seal.
Well, that's because these GOP leaders like that at the local level and the state level are worried more about holding that title
Mhm.
than actually earning that title, being that leader to get out and get these things done to make the party better and to fight for the right, fight for the people. They just want to hold that title. And the best thing to do, they like smooth sailing water. They don't like it when it starts getting wavy and everything, and they have to actually sail the boat. They want that smooth sailing there.
And they're all in bed with Republicans who are running, you know, healthcare monopolies in a very woke manner and in not a free market way, in a monopoly. And they're in bed with the woke universities, who our woke university here is run by a Republican, and yet the wokeness is infiltrated the whole thing. It looks like Marxism. That girl probably was taught a lot of this through indoctrination at there, because we know that a lot of the socialism, humanism, the climate agenda is being taught. All of these woke agendas are being taught. And, you know, so they're buddies with these people who are running these organizations who have, and they're funding their campaigns, and they're all promoting all this woke ideology. So they don't rock the boat, and they continue to claim that people that are, you know, supporting and injecting this toxic ideology into our communities are actually Republicans.
Yep. Okay, well, anything else that you want to get in before we finish this up?
Just to say, you know, be aware of the UN agenda, know the speaking points, and then take a look at your city plan and cross-reference them. And you can see a lot of the same language in our current city plans. And we need to stay on top of this. We need to inform people, and we really need to get, you know, like the commission, we applied a lot of pressure to them after that article came out, and they said they were going to take it out, and yet they didn't. And so we need to stay on top of them, if possible, get people in there. I'm hoping that we have a couple of our people run for city commission, because this pressure from outside is not doing the trick. I don't know how else to get it done unless we get somebody in there. Because we've been applying the pressure, and it's just continuing on the same trajectory. So, you know, stay vigilant, stay on top of them, and be aware. Educate yourself so that you know what it looks like, and you can identify it when you see it, and you know the keywords, and you can teach other people about it so that they see it too.
Yeah. Okay. Good advice. And, you know, if you don't know anything about these issues, look them up. Agenda 2030 and 2020, 2045, and all this stuff. And, you know, look it up and try to, or find some videos on YouTube or Rumble. You may have to go to Rumble and find those, but I'm sure there's some on YouTube as well. But, you know, try to educate yourself on this and pay attention to what's going on. When you learn some of this stuff and research it, and then you catch your news and you hear this stuff, you're like, uh-oh, this is some of the stuff that I read. And this is where you start, the red flags start popping up and make you start thinking, and you actually see, you know, this is what happens to people. This is what happens to folks like Danielle who start seeing this stuff, and this is why we get involved in these things. So
I do want to say, so Frank Nicely, Senator Nicely, he actually passed some legislation against the UN agenda, and it passed. So it kind of got in under the radar, and that Tennessee's for state sovereignty was one of the groups that championed it. But be familiar with that law too. I think it was Senate Bill 1147, and I forget what the law number is right now that it's instituted. But it even mentions the net zero agenda, which is the carbon agenda, which doesn't mean that we can't emit zero carbon. What it means is that we'll have carbon allotments. So if you have a lot of land, you'll have more carbon allotments. If you don't, you'll have fewer. So, you know, if it like these elitists, they'll still be able to fly their jets because they have plenty of carbon allotments. But people like us, you know, we'll have to sell our carbon allotments to them. They're predicting it to be a neo-feudal look like neo-feudal, but Senator Nicely's law even mentions net zero in there. So it says, you know, any funding towards the UN agenda, any implementation. So it's a great law. What we'll have to push for it to actually be upheld and enforced. But so there is an existing law and mechanism that we can point to these people and be like, listen, if you're implementing this agenda in Tennessee, this is unlawful.
okay. I like Frank Nicely. He does a lot of good work, and he tries to get some good bills passed, and he runs into a lot of pushback from his own party. So, you know, it's like folks like Rand Paul and those guys, they get a lot of pushback from our own party. So anyway, well, thank you, Danielle, for joining me today, and we'll get this information out. And with that, stay on the line. Got anything else you want to say before we go?
Thank you, Charles, and good to see everybody again. And our website here is johnsoncitytnfreedom.com if you want to check us out.
Okay. All right. Thank you all for joining me and watching this. Share this information. It's not just in Johnson City. This kind of stuff is happening all across the state of Tennessee and all across the country. There's a reason that when somebody starts talking about doing away with the UN and getting the UN out of the United States, that they're treated like conspiracy theories. So keep that in mind. All right. Thank you. God bless you. Pray for our country. Pray for our state. And man, this country needs prayer. All right. Thank you. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next podcast.